Texas A&M is not a service academy. I know stuff. Oh, yeah, good morning. It's Uncle Lou here. That's right. It is me, Uncle Lou, Loustradamus, live on LouTube for you. Thanks for watching. I really appreciate it. Make sure you're subscribed to the channel if you're not already. I post these pointless, barely watchable college football videos almost every single day of the year. We do call-in shows a couple of nights a week, live streams on the weekends. We have a really good time. We've built a good community of college football fans in and around this channel, fans of teams from coast to coast. Make sure you're subscribed. The season is less than a month away. All right, Texas A&M 2025. We're going to do a season preview and prediction here. I'm going to get to the schedule in just a second and go through it game by game and give you a winner and a loser for every single week. I've done a ton of these videos already, so if you're curious on my thoughts about maybe your favorite team or some other teams in college football, there's a playlist that has all my prediction videos in it, or you can just click back through the channel and find the videos. But in the SEC, I've done Georgia, Bama, Tennessee, LSU, Florida, South Carolina. In the Big Ten, I've done Ohio State, Oregon, Penn State, Michigan, Southern Cal, Nebraska. I've done Miami. I've done Clemson. I've done I think Arizona State. I've done Colorado. I've done Georgia. I've done a ton of them. Click back and check them out. But this is going to be the Texas A&M. All right, Mike Elko back for year two. I like Mike Elko. He's a really good coach. He did a good job at Duke. And I thought he did an okay job in his first year last year at Texas A&M, 8-4. The problem is that's sort of become the stigma with Texas A&M. So, you come in after sort of a rough exit by Jimbo Fisher there. You come into sort of a tricky situation and you go 8-4 under normal circumstances and conditions. I think you'd look at that and say that's a pretty successful year. First year head coach in the SEC. But because of the sort of never-ending jokes about Texas A&M being Texas 8-4, going 8-4 every single year, it sort of just feels like a rinse and repeat type situation for Texas A&M. They were 8-4 again last year. They've averaged 8 wins a year since joining the SEC almost 15 years ago. They rarely have a really bad season. They rarely have a really good season. I think they have one double-digit win season since joining the SEC 15 years ago. They've never made the SEC championship game. They never made a 4-team playoff. Last year, the first year, the 12-team playoff. They missed out on that. They were a little closer than you might think, though. Going into the last game of the season last year, Texas A&M, of course, played Texas, the in-state rivalry game that got taken away from us about 15 years ago when A&M joined the SEC. We finally got to see that game again, and Texas A&M lost that game. Had Texas A&M won that game, they actually would have made it to the SEC championship game. Even though they had 3 losses heading into that game, one of those losses was a non-con loss to Notre Dame. So they only had 2 conference losses heading into that last game of the season against Texas, and had they won that game, it would have been Georgia who got left out of the SEC championship game, and we would have seen a rematch, Texas A&M and Texas. But of course, what ifs don't matter. They lost that game 17-7, missing out on the SEC championship game and the playoffs. They ended up making the Las Vegas Bowl, where they got beat by a pretty below average Southern Cal team, a team that barely made a bowl game last year. They had to beat UCLA in the last month of the season just to get bowl eligible. Southern Cal did, and Southern Cal beat them 35-31 in the bowl game. They also had losses during the regular season to Texas, like I mentioned, on the road at Auburn, and then earlier in the year at Notre Dame and at South Carolina, or home against Notre Dame and on the road against South Carolina. So 8-4. For Texas A&M, 8-5 after the bowl loss. Can they improve on that year 2 with Mike Elko? I like Mike Elko. Like I said, he's a good coach. They've got a quarterback back in Marcel Reed, who you would expect to take a significant step forward in year 2. And he showed signs last year of being pretty good. He likes to run around. He had 400 or 500 yards rushing. He's got to improve on his passing a little bit. I think he had about 1,800 yards last year. But again, going from year 1 to year 2, you would expect some improvement there. Any player, year 1 starter, going into his second year as a starter, regardless of the position you play, you would expect a significant step forward you would expect a significant step forward there. Now, when you look at Texas A&M last year, offense was not really their issue. Now, they had a little bit of a quarterback hokey-pokey situation going on due to some injuries and moving some guys around when things weren't going well, but they did settle on Marcel Reed. And their offense was actually pretty good last year. In fact, when you look at just conference games last year, Texas A&M scored the most points of any SEC team. They averaged almost 30 points a game in conference play last year. That's higher than any other SEC team. So they had a decent offense. The defense is really what let them down last year. They had a really, really bad defense, particularly against the pass. And they've got to improve on that significantly heading into this coming season if they want to get over that sort of 8-4 hump and maybe potentially compete for an SEC title game appearance or a spot in the 12-team playoff. Can they do that? Well, they addressed a lot of those issues in the offseason. You're probably not surprised to hear that. We'll start on the offensive side of the ball, though. Marcel Reed, I already mentioned, is back after a pretty good year last year, over 1,800 yards passing, almost 600 yards rushing, and he didn't even play the whole season. Averaged 30 points a game in conference play, like I mentioned. Receivers, they took a hit in the transfer portal there. They lost Noah Thomas, who's a big-bodied outside wide receiver, one of these guys with speed that can go up and get the ball, sort of a great jump ball guy. They lost him to the transfer portal, so they ended up having to bring in a couple of wide receivers from the transfer portal. They went out and got KJ Concepcion from NC State and Mario Craver from Mississippi State. So an SEC to SEC transfer there, a speed guy. So we'll see how they sort of fit in with Mike Elko and what he wants to do there offensively for Texas A&M. Now, one key piece that they get back is the running back they had last year, Le'Veon, I think that's how you say it, Le'Veon Moss. He had almost 800 yards rushing, and that's missing 5 games due to injury. He's back from injury now, and when healthy last year, he was one of the better-looking backs in the SEC. So getting him back obviously is a big boost. Offensive line, I think, is going to be the strength of this Texas A&M team. They got multiple draft picks, I think, on that offensive line. Trey Zune, potential all-conference guy. They got 2 returning guards in Chase Basantis and Armaj Reed Adams. I think they're going to have a really good offensive line. I don't think that's going to be the issue. I think if Marcel Reed wants to run, it's going to be because he wants to run, not because he has to. I think they're going to do a good job protecting him and opening up some holes there for Le'Veon Moss. I think they're going to be okay, again, on the offensive side of the ball. Like I mentioned, defense is where they really need to take a significant step forward. They remind me a lot of last year's Miami team. Not as exaggerated as that. Miami, probably the best offense they ever had last year. Seems like they scored 50 points in their sleep with Cam Ward at quarterback. And then their defense was giving up 45 points a game. It was just horrific. It was just unbelievable to watch. Texas A&M was sort of a lesser version of that. They had a good offense, good enough to win a lot of games. Defense let them down in critical spots a lot over the course of the season. They're going to have to improve on that. The bowl game is a great example. Texas A&M had a 17-point lead over Southern Cal in that bowl game, and they blew it. Now, I know not everybody puts a whole lot of stock in bowl games anymore, but when your defense is bad over the course of the season and then you see it again in the bowl game, I think it's a fair criticism to say that the defense let them down and has got to get a whole lot better. They rank 13th in the SEC against the pass. That's got to drastically improve. They face some pretty good quarterbacks this year, as we'll see in a second when we get ready to take a look at the schedule. Now, they've got a couple of good pieces in the secondary. I like Will Lee and their nickelback, Tyreek Chappell, I think, are good players, borderline NFL-type players. Will Lee in particular, I think most likely will play in the NFL one day. Again, they brought in some transfers here, too. They brought Julian Humphrey in from Georgia, who actually started some at Georgia, so it's not a situation where he was just buried on the depth chart. He wasn't a full-time starter. Georgia's one of these teams that kind of rotates players in and out over various points of the season, but he was unhappy with the playing time he was getting there, so he transferred out. Texas A&M lands him. They get Jordan Shaw from Washington, so I'm not the only one that sees the weaknesses on Texas A&M being on the defensive side of the ball. Clearly, Texas A&M staff sees that too, and they have tried to address that in the transfer portal. The pass rush was also a big problem last year for Texas A&M, and again, that's something that's going to have to get a whole lot better. Defensive end Cassius Howell did have 4 sacks last season. He's going to have to do a little bit better than that. No one else on their entire roster had more than 2.5, so they had a hard time getting to the quarterback last year. And again, they play several teams this year. If you look over here at the schedule, who are going to be able to sling the ball around, or at least we think are going to be able to sling the ball around. They weren't much better on the defensive side of the ball when it came to stopping the run either. They allowed more runs of 20 yards than any other team in the SEC. That's backbreaking for a defense to be giving up 20-yard runs. Got to get better there. They get a couple of linebackers back, but again, those linebackers need to play better. So my question for Texas A&M heading into 2025, can Marcel Reed stay healthy? I think that's important because we saw when healthy last year what he can do, and he's an exciting player. He reminds me a lot of Lenore Sellers at South Carolina. Not saying one's better than the other. It's just that style of quarterback is kind of what he reminds me of. The wide receivers, they're going to have to hit in the portal with those two additions at wide receiver, and the offensive line, which again I think is the strength of this team offensively, is going to have to stay healthy and hold up over the course of the season. Defensively, they need massive improvement on all three levels if they want to get over the 8-win hump and potentially make a push for a 12-team playoff. What does Vegas think about Texas A&M's chances in 2025? Now, technically, what Vegas thinks doesn't matter. You can be picked to finish dead last in your conference and win the conference. We saw that last year in the Big 12 with Arizona State. They had some of the worst odds in America to win their conference last year, and at the end of the season, they were sitting on top of the Big 12 and found themselves in the playoffs. They were actually a pretty good team. But when you look at the odds right now heading into the season, it is a pretty good indication of what people think or how people feel about a team heading into the season. And these are people who are willing to put their money down. So this isn't just some idiot on the internet like me blabbing his mouth for a living. These are people who are actually willing to risk their own hard-earned dollars to sort of back their beliefs up with their money. And according to the people out in Vegas, the win total for Texas A&M this year right now is 7.5. No, you can't win 7.5 games. Again, these are betting numbers. So people are betting over or under this number. So if you think Texas A&M is a permanent 8-4 team, you bet over 7.5. Or if you think they're going to improve, they are going to get better defensively and the offense is going to be good again. Maybe you think they're going 9-3, 10-2. You would bet over that 7.5 number. If you're thinking this defense is terrible and I don't like these wide receivers they brought in, and what if Le'Veon Moss gets hurt again? Maybe you think they're doing worse than last year. Maybe you think they go 7-5 or 6-6. You would bet under that number of 7.5. But this gives you an idea of how many games people think Texas A&M is going to win, and they think they're going to win 7 or 8. So the over/under right now sits at 7.5. Winning the conference, the only guaranteed way into the playoff, winning your conference. What are the chances Texas A&M can do that according to the people out in the desert? Well, they've got the 5th best odds. 5th best odds in the SEC. That's pretty good. The bad news is there is a massive drop-off in the odds from 4th to 5th. In fact, I don't normally put this up on the screen during these videos, but this is such a significant number here. So Texas is the favorite to win the SEC. You can see it here at plus 280. If you don't gamble or don't know anything about it, the closer to 100 that this number is, the better the odds are, basically. What this number means exactly is if you bet $100 and Texas wins the SEC, you win $280. If you bet Texas A&M and they win, your 100 wins you 1,500. So the odds are Texas at plus 280, followed very closely by Georgia at plus 290. A little bit of a drop off to Alabama in 3rd at plus 450, LSU at plus 650, but then a massive drop off here from LSU to Texas A&M at plus 1,500. So 4 teams with what I would say a good chance of winning the SEC, at least according to the Vegas numbers, and then a massive drop off to other teams after that, including Texas A&M, Florida, Ole Miss, Auburn, Oklahoma, Tennessee, so forth, on down the line. So again, that's not an indication that Texas A&M is going to be the 5th best team in the SEC. They might be the worst team. They might win the SEC. This just gives you an idea of what the general public feels about Texas A&M heading into the season. All right, well, wrong side over here. It's time to go through the schedule game by game and give you a winner and a loser for every single week. Now, like I mentioned, I've done a ton of these videos already. So if you've watched those other videos, you already know which direction I'm headed. I did it again, wrong side. Which direction I'm headed in some of these games here, but I'm going to go through them game by game. UTSA and Utah State to kick off the season. 2 home games against lower classification, non-conference teams. And I think Texas A&M gets easy wins in both of these. I'm not here to crap on UTSA or Utah State, but the reality is they just don't have the talent or the depth to keep up with a team like Texas A&M. Even if you think they're a middle-of-the-road type of team, it would be a massive, massive upset and a huge blow to Mike Elko's reputation if they were to lose either of these 2 games at home. I don't think they will. I think Texas A&M will start 2-0. And then they have a huge game on the road at Notre Dame. And this game is huge for a lot of reasons. Number one, Notre Dame made the playoffs last year. So this is a good litmus test game for Texas A&M. How do they stack up against what most people think to be one of the best 10 or 12 teams in the country that's probably going to be in the playoffs again in 2025? Now, last year, this was a pretty good game. It was played in Texas A&M last year at College Station in week 1. And Notre Dame won 23-13. Now, this was sort of the rare type of game. This was sort of like opposite day for Texas A&M. And actually, we saw this in this game and the Texas game last year for Texas A&M. I just spent a lot of time talking about how good Texas A&M was offensively and how bad they were defensively last year. But again, I'll put this on the screen for you. If you go back and remember the first game of the season against Notre Dame, I thought they played pretty good defensively. I mean, they gave up 23 points. I believe that in today's college football, if you're giving up 24 points or less, you should win the game 99% of the time. In other words, your offense should be able to put 25, 26, 30, 32 points on the board almost at will. A lot of the rules in college football now are geared towards the offense. You know, you've got targeting rules. You can't even look at the quarterback without it being roughing the passer, pass interference penalties, these kinds of things. So in this game here against Notre Dame, the offense was a no-show. Defense, I thought, played pretty well, but they lose 23-13. Then you go down to the last game of the regular season against Texas, and it's a similar thing. They held Texas to 17 points, and 7 of those points were a pick 6 late in the game. So this was a competitive game. The defense played well, good enough to win, I think, but the offense just couldn't do anything in that game. So those two games were a little weird for Texas A&M last year, but they did lose. They have Notre Dame week 3 this year on the road in South Bend. I actually think Texas A&M goes up there and gets the win. Now, I know that the odds of that happening are probably less than 50%. Notre Dame is a favorite in that game. You can look these things up. Notre Dame's a favorite in that game. I just have a feeling about this one that, first of all, I think Texas, I'm a Mike Elko believer. I'm a Mike Elko fan. You look at what he did at Duke. Never made the ACC championship game or the playoffs or anything like that, but beat Clemson in an opening weekend game a couple of years ago when he was the head coach at Duke. He sort of he's shown the ability to sort of win these bigger games. I think Notre Dame's going to be a good team, but they've got a first-year starting quarterback up there in C.J. Carr. They lost a lot of pieces to the NFL. Now, they're talented, and I've done a prediction video for Notre Dame. I think they're going to the playoffs again in 2025, so this isn't a shot at Notre Dame here. I think Notre Dame's good. I think Texas A&M, though, goes up there and gets the win. They're 3-0. Then they have a bye week, and this is where it starts to get a little tricky for me with Texas A&M. It's hard to wrap your head around the idea as a college football fan, I think, that a team could be good enough to go on the road and beat Notre Dame, for example, and then lose to maybe any of these teams between these 2 bye weeks, Auburn, Mississippi State, Florida, Arkansas, and LSU. You probably think Notre Dame's better than all of those teams. I might even agree with you. That's just not how college football works. Almost every single year, every single team in the country loses to somebody that you didn't think they were going to lose to, and beat somebody that you didn't think they were going to beat. Just think of any random team. Take Georgia as an example. You know, they lose to Alabama, but then beat Texas twice. You look at Florida. They get blown out by Miami, but then beat Ole Miss and LSU. Look at Notre Dame last year. 11-1, beat Georgia in the playoffs, made it to the national championship game. And then you look back and you go, what game did they lose? Northern Illinois. College football is not played in a straight line. So I've got them beating Notre Dame. I don't think they're winning all the games here between these 2 bye weeks. I just don't. Now, I've already done an LSU version of this video. I've got them losing on the road at LSU. LSU and Texas A&M to me are very similar in that they're good enough when they play well, I think, to compete and potentially beat almost anybody in the SEC. They're also inconsistent enough and have enough question marks, concerns, or issues that you can see them losing a couple of games maybe you don't expect them to lose. So I've got them losing that game on the road at LSU. That's not an embarrassing loss. That's a tough place to play. Florida. I've already done the Florida version of this video, and I've got Texas A&M beating Florida at home. Again, where you played a game is extremely important. On the road at LSU, much more difficult than home against Florida. So got them losing on the road at LSU, winning at home against Florida. That leaves me with Auburn, Mississippi State, and on the road at Arkansas. I think they get the win against Auburn at home. Number one, it's at home. Number two, Auburn's got quarterback issues, offense issues. Hugh Freeze coaching for his life. They haven't had a winning record in what seems like forever. They have a bye week before this game. Even if they lose on the road at Notre Dame, they've got a week to recuperate, get over the hangover or the depression or whatever sets in from taking a loss. If they were to lose to Notre Dame, I've got them winning that game. But if they were to lose, I think they come back home, regroup, get the win against Auburn. That leaves me with the home game against Mississippi State and the road game at Arkansas. I think they're losing one of those games. I think they're better than Mississippi State. I think they're better than Arkansas. I think Mississippi State and Arkansas are going to be two of the worst teams in the SEC. Them, Kentucky, Vandy. But again, unless you think Mississippi State and Arkansas are going winless in the SEC, which could it happen? Yeah. Is it likely? No. Then that means those two teams are going to beat somebody you don't expect them to beat. Unfortunately for Texas A&M, I think they're one of those teams. So I have to figure out, do I think they're going to lose at home to Mississippi State, or do I think they're going to lose on the road at Arkansas? Well, Mississippi State is a team that's probably going to be slinging the ball around this year, and Texas A&M has struggled against the pass. Arkansas has got a big physical quarterback that can hurt you with his legs. Sam Pittman, another guy probably coaching for his life at that point in the season. I'm going to kind of go against the grain here. I'm going to give Texas A&M the loss at home to Mississippi State. Surprising loss, I know. And I'm going to give them the win on the road at Arkansas. My confidence level in those two picks is not very high. However, I do think that they are losing two of these games between the bye weeks. I've got them losing to LSU. I've got them beating Auburn and Florida. So I think they're going to lose to either Mississippi State or Arkansas. I'm going to give them a loss to Mississippi State and a win on the road against the Hogs. Then their second bye week comes around before they travel on the road to take on the Missouri Tigers. They beat the soul out of Missouri last year at home. I think they beat them again on the road. Missouri was 9-3 last year. They might be the worst 9-3 team I've ever seen. I was not impressed at all with Missouri. How they managed to stay ranked within the top 25 is beyond me. They got blown out by almost any decent team they played. Alabama beat them by 100. Texas A&M beat them by 100. It's not a good year for Missouri, in my opinion, outside of their record, which can be deceiving. I think they go on the road, get the win at Missouri. And they get South Carolina at home. And I think this is a critical game for Texas A&M. They're lucky to get this game at home. I think South Carolina is going to be a good team. I mentioned earlier, the quarterbacks here are very similar. Marcel Reed, the quarterback for Texas A&M, reminds me a lot of Lenore Sellers at South Carolina. I think this is going to be a very close game that could go either way. I'm giving Texas A&M the benefit of the doubt because it's at home. But this is a game I think you could potentially lose, but I got you beating South Carolina. And then here comes the SEC versus the FCS in November for no reason at all. I'm not shitting on Texas A&M in particular here. Almost the entire SEC is doing this. It's completely ridiculous. This is where a ninth conference game is supposed to be. This is where a ninth conference game should be. They need to get their shit together and go ahead and go to 9 conference games. Anyway, and get off the high horse there. You'll beat the soul out of Samford for no reason because you're playing them for no reason in November for no reason. And then the big rivalry game again on the road at Texas. Now, if you couldn't beat them at home last year, I don't see you beating them on the road this year. A lot of debate about Arch Manning heading into the season. How good will he be? I don't think it's possible for Arch Manning to be good enough to live up to the hype. The hype is so out of control for Arch Manning. And I don't say that to say that I think he's going to be bad. I think Arch Manning is going to be good. I think at the end of the year, we might look at Arch Manning and say he's the best quarterback in the SEC. But the hype for him has gone on for so long and has just reached ridiculous proportions. Unless Texas goes 15-0, wins a national title, and he wins the Heisman, it feels like people are going to say, see, you didn't live up to the hype. I think he's an improvement over Quinn Ewers. I think Quinn Ewers was a good quarterback, rarely lost the game for Texas, but rarely showed the ability to sort of put the team on his shoulders and win a game. There was the game on the road at Alabama a couple of years ago, which I think might have been the best game he ever played. And he won that game for Texas, I think. But generally speaking, I think Quinn Ewers was kind of just a keep your head above water type of player. Not bad, not great. I think Arch Manning has potential to be a little bit better than that, sort of elevate Texas maybe to places offensively that they were unable to go, generally speaking, under Quinn Ewers. And I think they win this game. Texas does. I think Texas A&M loses for the second year in a row to their bitter rival, Texas. And that puts Texas A&M at 9-3. So better than 8-4, which seems to be the rinse and repeat routine that Texas A&M has been on for the better part of the last 15 years since joining the SEC, but probably not enough to make it to an SEC championship game or a 12-team playoff. I think they come up a little bit short. Feels to me like Texas A&M will be this year's version of last year's Ole Miss or South Carolina or Bama, sort of that 9-3 team that cries about their schedule and how they should be in the playoffs even if they went 0-12 because the SEC is hard. But they probably get left out at 9-3. But a step forward for Mike Elko in year 2. Last year 8-4, this year 9-3. All right, I appreciate you watching. Let me know down below what you think about Texas A&M. What do you think their record will be? Which games am I wrong about? Feel free to let me know. Appreciate you watching. Have a good morning.